Hey gang, welcome to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast, the show that brings you the men and women of track and field and explores their unique stories. The show is brought to you by Gill Athletics. Head on over to Gill Athletics on Instagram, Gill Athletics 1918, or Facebook, facebook.com/Gill Athletics, and check out the really cool contest we got going on right now for this week. You've got your own pit builder feature on our website, and we've got contests going on. Name your own pit on Instagram and then build your own pit on Facebook, and the winner is going to get a $250 certificate for our website. That will buy you a whole lot of stuff. Head on over there right now. I'm your host, Mike Cunningham, National Sales Manager for Gill, and this episode our guest is Scott Richardson of Auburn University. Scott has been at Auburn now for 16 years. We talk about how he got into coaching, how he got to Auburn University, and then the conversation changed over to a major project that they did about 3 years ago involving track and field equipment. And we were so humbled to be chosen as their provider of track and field equipment, and thought it would be interesting for you to hear the story of how and why, and maybe it might help you as you vet your own equipment provider for your next pole vault pit, hurdles, or even your next baton. So check it out. I think you're going to enjoy this one. So without further ado, please help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Scott Richardson.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Scott.
I'm good, man. How are you doing, brother?
Oh, man. This interview, this podcast episode was meant to be, because we are getting just all kinds of technical difficulties, and yet we're still fighting for it, and we're here right now, Scott. Scott, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. It really is. This is going to be a special one for me. We've become not only just client and sales professional over the past few years, but hopefully I'm not putting myself out there too much. We've actually become friends as well. So I really enjoy that aspect of
Likewise, it's been a great partnership and friendship.
Awesome. Well, let's take a step back here, Scott. Let's talk about, you're at Auburn University now. Walk us through kind of how you got into coaching and maybe some mentors that you had, that people that helped bring you into coaching, and some of the spots.
Yeah, sure thing. I was a D2 guy, Mike. I'm from northern Indiana. I grew up about a half hour from Chicago, but went to college at the University of Indianapolis to run for a guy named Jerry England, who was, to this day, he's like a second father to me. Great guy. He'll be 90 this year. And anyway, he and I are still very close. And I ran for Coach England. When back then, gosh, most of the guys were graduating in 4 years. I was the knucklehead who took 5 years to get through college. And when my majors were pre-law and history education. And at the end of 4 years, I was real close to both of them, but didn't have either one of them finished. And so I knew I was going to be coming back for a fifth year. And Coach England asked me to help out coaching. And I remember the first practice of that fifth year of college for me when I was out there on the track. And I said, this is it, man. I found my calling in life. And so,
so during your first 4 years when you were an athlete, coaching was never in your vernacular. You were thinking maybe becoming a teacher or a lawyer.
Yeah, that was it. I always sort of felt this internal pressure. I have two older brothers and older sister. They're all doing very, very well in the business world. And I think probably deep down in the recesses of my mind, I figured I'd be a high school teacher and coach, and maybe coach track and football at the high school level. But then I also felt that pull to make some more money, and so I thought, go be a lawyer, and I can talk and argue. And so anyway, at the end of those 4 years, I was close to both those degrees, but like I said, didn't have either one of them. So that fifth year is when Coach England asked me to come help out. And that first day on the track, I got hooked. I was, man, this is it for me. So much to the chagrin of my parents, I aborted plans for law school. And I got my graduate degree down at Eastern Kentucky University, thanks to Coach England's help. He knew Rick Erdman down there, who was my first boss at the Division I level. And being a GA at EKU was really cool because, unlike here at Auburn, where we have 6 coaches and an ops person and all that, EKU didn't have a full complement of coaches. So even though I was a 22-year-old grad assistant, I was out on the road recruiting, and I was developing training programs, and I got to plug in right away. So a lot of trial by fire. Made a lot of mistakes in those early years, but that's I think maybe the best way to learn. So.
And so your undergrad was in pre-law and history education. What did you, now that you wanted to be a coach, what did you get
I just
your
did
grad
a
work
complete flip the script and threw that old one away. I got my master's degree in exercise physiology, and I found while I was an okay student undergrad, I really excelled at grad school because it was everything that really held my interest. I didn't have to sift through any of the courses that I didn't want to take. Undergrad you have to take the whole litany of things, and grad school you can kind of lock in and specify. I think the only class I didn't like in grad school was stats, but all the other classes, kinesiology and exercise phys and sports psychology, that stuff was right up my alley. So,
and what were you? We actually didn't talk about what you actually coach. What were you as an athlete, event wise, and then what were you coaching?
Yeah, I was sort of a jack of all trades, master of none.
Wait, so you're a decathlete?
Kind of a wannabe. Unfortunately for me, my best event was the 400 meters, and I had three pretty good teammates at the D2 ranks that took me to the nationals a couple of times. But my high school coach was an NCAA champion pole vaulter, so I had that background in me, and that was probably my first love was vaulting. But I was a much better quarter miler than I was a vaulter. So I played around with the horizontals and the vault and. Like I say, a little bit of everything as the multis guys typically do. And then when I got to EKU, the Coach Erdman was a very successful distance coach. And the first thing he did was snatch me up and say, "You're coming with me in cross country." And I said, "What?"
Oh, wow.
He's like, "Yeah, because you already know the sprints and jumps. You might be in a position where you have to coach cross country someday." And that's important for just a little bit later in the story. You'll hear that. But so I latched onto him and started working with the distance runners in the fall. And he said, we'll plug you back in with the sprinters in the springtime. But, I was at every cross country workout. I traveled with them to the meets, and then I kind of had to coach those guys and gals on the side around the cross country schedule. And I learned a lot in the process. It was great. That was probably the area I was least familiar with in the track and field world. And so,
yeah, most people would have gone kicking and screaming like, no, look here, I'm a jumps coach or I'm a sprints coach. You're going to make me do what? But man, that's really forward thinking from him as far as like how to develop
he was great for that. He just recently retired, and his son's actually taken over the program. His son actually had a similar career path to me, only where I wanted to go to law school. He actually did go to law school, and he gave up that law practice to take over the program at EKU. But Rick was, again, he was always kind of had distance running on the brain, and he was going to make sure that I knew how to do that as well. And it was pretty fortuitous because, I graduated a year and a half later, and he asked me to stick around and coach that spring semester. I guess this was the spring of '96. And so Coach, I already got my master's degree. Can't work for free. And he said, start a PhD program. So I got about about 10 hours towards a PhD, and I never finished it and have really no desire to, but it kept me employed for that spring semester to keep coaching track and network a little bit. And he was great about showcasing me and taking me to meets and introducing me to other coaches. And so that year, there was a job open at a tiny school in Texas, University of Texas Pan American. It's now changed its name, but he knew the head coach down there, and he had an opening for a sprint jump guy. And through Coach Rib and I, interviewed, went down there, got offered the job and accepted. And I want to say that was in July of '96. Well, that was a pretty big year. The Olympics were in Atlanta, and I got into the lottery, and I drew every track and field final for the Atlanta Games to go watch. And so I was on cloud nine. And, I was supposed to start Pan Am at September 1. So I was like, this is perfect. I can go to the Olympics and kind of enjoy my summer before my work begins. And I'll never forget, I was in Atlanta. It was the night of the Olympic Park bombing. And I called my parents to let them know I was fine. I was nowhere near it. And my mom says, "You got to call the AD at Pan Am. He wants to talk to you." So I picked up the phone and gave him a shout. And he said, "Scott, your boss has retired from coaching. He's moving to Boise, Idaho to become a stockbroker, I think. If you want to be the head coach, you got to get down here right away."
Wait a minute. You were fresh out of grad school.
No experience other than 2 years as a GA.
You're like 22?
Well, when I finished my grad school, I was 24 when I took the job at Pan Am. So, but that November I turned 25, and it kind of tying back into Coach Erdman and making me be a shadow in for distance is, I'm in a
Right.
position right now because Reed Harder, the head coach at Pan Am, was the distance coach and the head coach. And so I get there, in middle of August, and I got to coach cross country right away. So,
Holy
those 2
cow.
years of guidance under Rick Urban and learned how to, the nuances, I guess, of distance running were critical to my early years at Pan Am. And I think, and he was a confidant all along, still is. Coach Bell, Sam Bell at Indiana, who passed a few years back, Coach Bell recruited me. And even though I didn't go to IU to run for him, he sort of championed my cause when I got into coaching. And so when I got to Pan Am, and I felt like I knew track and field pretty well. I'd been doing track since I was about 10. So, 24 or 14 years of that. But I didn't know anything about being a head coach and how to administer or run a program. That was all new to
right.
me. And so anytime I hit a stumbling block, I would call up Coach Urban or Coach Bell and seek their advice, and I would just kind of charge on. So,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, they were
pretty good
great, and
there.
they really were. And so year 2, we actually won and I was distance coach now. I was coaching everything from the 400 meters on up, and hired a guy named Jim Van Ottingen, who was a very good coach, is a very good coach, I should say. And Jim was my first assistant, and Jim took all the field events, and it was a kind of a 2-man showdown there. I coached the pole vault and the 400 and on up, and Jim coached the short sprints and horizontals, and we just kind of worked it from that perspective. So, Jim was a great recruiter and helped me out a lot. And we actually, a year later, won the Sun Belt Conference, and not in track, but in cross country. And
that's funny. What did
he and
Coach
Coach
say
Bell
about
both
that?
were just, I was probably more shocked than anybody, but, I really, all I did was sort of steal their workouts and their mindset towards distance running. And, but, with all that, it was fun. I think at 25, I was the youngest Division I head coach in the nation, but I was not ready to be a head coach. And it showed administratively. There were areas we were sorely lacking in. Nobody's ready for that at that age. So a year later, I'm calling up Coach Bell and asking advice, and he very politely says, "Scott, I think you might be in over your head down there, and we're going to have a job opening up here in the jumps. Would you be interested in it?" So I was at Pan Am just a short year and a half, and then I bolted for Indiana University. Went from being the head guy at Pan Am to being the low man on the totem pole at IU, which is
was closer to home.
But it's also where I was from a coaching standpoint too. It was kind of more in my wheelhouse doing the jumps, and then and just again being really being mentored in the profession as opposed to trying to have to figure it out for yourself. Coach Bell was one of the Olympic coaches, and so he was a great mentor to me, and I miss him dearly. I've been very fortunate. No matter where I've been, I've had great people to learn from, and Coach Bell was certainly that. What I should have been a little bit more on the ball was that Coach Bell was about 70 years old, and that following fall he retired. And so here I am, with a master's degree, trying to figure out step 2. I left the gig where I was calling the shots to go to the Big Ten, and there was another guy, a D3 coach named Rob Johnson at Tiny Wabash College in Indiana, and he said, "Hey, you need to call Jerry Quiller up at Army. He's got a job for you." I said, "Well, coaching what?" He said, "Does it matter? You don't have a job."
That's a great response.
And so what I didn't know was that Rob and Q were pretty close. They were on the Olympic staff together in Sydney 2000. And so I didn't know Jerry Quiller from anybody. And I called him up and I said, "Coach Quiller?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Hey, Scott Richardson." And I said, "Oh, you're the guy Rob Johnson was telling me about. So, hey, we want to bring you up for interviews." Just like that. And it was kind of neat giving me the chance to go to West Point for more money than I was making in Indiana, and just kind of a new environment. But the really cool thing was my dad he had 2 jobs his whole life. He was in the Marine Corps and he worked in the steel mills in Indiana. And I really thought I was going to be going to the service route. And but my parents were adamant that all 4 of their kids were going to go to college. Either one of them I had a college degree. And my dad said, if you go in, you're going to go in as an officer. And so I finished up college at Indianapolis there, and that was sort of my other plan. I thought, well, I'm going to go into the service, and just as you heard by my academics, wasn't real sure which route I wanted to go. So maybe the service will help me figure things out. Well, when I graduated college, undergrad back in '94, it was right after the first Gulf War, and a lot of guys were coming back with respiratory issues, and I've had asthma my whole life, and the medical review board would not clear me medically. So getting to go to West Point was really cool, because all of a sudden I'm in the environment without, having to give up my civilian liberties and freedoms,
Right.
And my first couple of years there, it was pretty cool, because I was a Department of Defense civilian employee. I was not in the Army. I just worked for the Army. And so I taught in their physical education program up there. I taught exercise physiology and kinesiology, and also taught in the combatives program. I was a boxing instructor up there as well, too.
Now, how were you a boxing instructor? Did you grow up doing boxing?
Not at all,
or
man.
what
I had a few share of scuffles with the neighborhood kids growing up, but no formal training in it. And when I got up there, I was sort of contracted as a 50-50 employee, half time teaching and coaching, and halftime teaching and halftime coaching. But so in the physical program at West Point, you're actually graded in three areas. You're graded academically, you're graded militarily, and you're graded physically. And so boxing is a required course at West Point. So my first real formal training, other than just being a fan of boxing, was when I became an instructor up there. And what they do is, before you can ever teach a course at West Point, you have to take the course. So with all the new instructors, and again, 90% of the people I worked with were military officers. There's only about 10% of us that were civilian faculty. We had to go through the course as students with other instructors, or I guess future instructors. And so we learned all the footwork and all the, punches and whatnot. And then we had to have graded bouts, and so we're fighting the other instructors, boxing, I should say, not fighting, but boxing the other instructors. And it's relatively safe. You got the headgear on and the mouthpieces and the big 16-ounce gloves. But what was funny was, in the class, we actually break kids down by not only ability but weight. Well, there aren't enough instructors to do that. So, a guy my size at the time, 5'10", 160, might be boxing a guy who was 6'4" and 210. And I get through my first bout with a pretty good guy, and all these guys were West Point grads, so they had actually taken the class as cadets, so they were one up on me. But what I found was, at that age, I was still pretty athletic and pretty fit, and I was quicker than most of them. I was lighter than most of them, and I was quicker. So, I wasn't throwing knockout punches, but I was scoring points. And, lo and behold, I win my first bout, and I win my second, and I win my third, and I win my fourth, and think, man, I might go 5-0. And I fought a pretty big guy too, who was a lieutenant colonel at the time. And I was just able to kind of move in and out without getting tagged, thankfully. So I go into about 5, and I see this little sawed-off captain. The guy was about, 5'7", 140 pounds. And I'm going to steamroll this guy. And, man, he lit me up like a Christmas tree. First off, he had 2 or 3 different black belts. The guy was an incredibly skilled martial artist, and then he was also West Point grad, taking boxing. And I don't think I scored a point against him. So I went 4-1, which is, hey, I'll take it. But
were these
basically
3-minute rounds?
You had to fight 3-minute rounds. Again, this is not just what you do. Is you take the whole course and learn all the moves and footwork, but then at the end of it, you get graded just like the cadets do. And so, I came out of there, I think, with he tagged me a couple times. I don't think I had any shiners, but I was probably a little bit swollen. And anyway, that was my.
Did you do any extracurricular studying? Did you watch Rocky? Did you go back and watch?
We always watched. Tyson was in his heyday back then, and I remember I was at a couple of the guys' house, and we got to actually watch Buster Douglas, knock him out, take him down, and that was shocked everybody. But mainly it was trial by fire. You're on the job training, and then so once you've completed the course, and if you pass it, and they actually drummed a few guys up who couldn't hang with it. Once you completed the course and you stepped foot in the classroom for the first time, you were not the instructor in charge. West Point was a neat teaching experience. First off, they had an average of 12 students in class, and if they had more than 12, they actually had 2 instructors. Well, That was the case in boxing. You would have about 18 to 20 kids. So there was always a primary instructor and then an assisting instructor. So I worked as an assisting instructor for that first semester before I guess they felt I was competent enough to take over my own class. And that's a teacher's dream. I really wish every public school teacher had the opportunity to teach at an academy, because, you walk into class and they snap to attention and salute you. And even as a civilian, I was a little uncomfortable with that, but they're saluting you and you salute them back and they tell you, "Oh, sir, all present accounted for," or "Sir, we're missing Cadet Cunningham." And then you just go to work. And,
that would probably be what you would have heard the most. Yeah.
But it was really a teacher's dream. And ironically, man, this is 25 years ago. I'm at walking my daughter to the bus stop 2 years ago, and this guy walks around with his little girl, and he says, "Mr. Richardson?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Hey, sir, I'm Cadet David Jones. You were my boxing instructor at West Point." The guy lives around. He's a civilian engineer. Lives, not even a quarter mile from me right now. So a small world.
Wow.
But anyway.
Not only small world, but that he remembered you.
Well,
that's amazing.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We used to tell, as the instructors, everybody, this is the most memorable class you're going to take at West Point. You're going to, 20 years from now, you're going to forget your chemistry or your, military. You're going to remember who you got your licks on and who tagged you. But it was fun because it was, the kind of kids you get at West Point, Mike. They're not the kids picking fights in school. Usually they're the Poindexter 1600 SAT score and their 4.0 GPAs and they've never gotten into a fight in their lives. And so the boxing is, of course, your freshman year. And it's we sell it as a confidence builder. We're not trying to elicit the warrior spirit or anything, but it's really to kind of, this is what it's going to be like. Can you control your emotions, and can you stay composed enough to do what we're teaching you under duress? And that's applicable not just in the boxing ring, but certainly in military life. And I would argue even in a civilian capacity, you'll be able to keep your wits about you. So,
for sure. So what's it like coaching at a military academy? I've had conversations with Ralph and Scotty and those guys out at Air Force Academy, because you mentioned you are getting a different kind of student athlete there. It's a rigorous testing progress to get into this school. They have to get, if I remember right, they have to get a congressman's referral or something like that. Like
it really is. And like I say, with my own experience, not at the academy, but when I was trying to go into the Marine Corps, fresh out of college, I got dinged for just having asthma. And, I could go out and run like a deer, but I understand they can't call timeout in a firefight so I can get my inhaler. And, hold on a second, guys, let me get my inhaler, No, but it's different. The throws coach at the time up there was a guy named Greg Gasner, who was an unbelievable teacher and a very good hammer thrower. And Greg, when I first got there, he said, "Scott, there's coaching, and then there's coaching at West Point." And he said, here's kind of how it goes. Freshman year, these kids are shell shocked, man. They're on their feet 18 hours a day. They're not getting to wear their running shoes. They're in combat boots or, dressed up in formation. They're taking 18 hours of class a semester, and they're all very, very academic oriented classes. There's no fluff courses at West Point. And then they're just getting barked at all day long. The upper class are just having their way with them. So the freshman year, it was a lot of, coaching the mind and making sure they weren't going to wash out on you. They were, they get homesick. It happens to everybody. I went 150 miles away and I got homesick, and I didn't have anybody yelling at me. You kind of help them through that first year. And then the sophomore year, they sort of get the routine down, and pretty good year. The junior year is probably the best athletically. And I won't say they all checked out on you by the time they were seniors, but the time they were seniors, they were thinking about where they're going to end up in the world. It wasn't, you didn't choose that pace just for track and field. You chose it for the higher calling and to become a leader and really serve your country. So it was different. Again, you don't have the caliber of athletes that probably we have here at Auburn or you had any stop in your coaching career. But what you get is a whole bunch of yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am kind of kids. We didn't have any discipline cases or issues at West Point.
You mentioned, they're not in running shoes, and I know not for track practice. They are in running shoes for track practice, but their normal day they're in their boots or whatnot. So things like that, and I don't know if they had to have the track kids have to have their own PT as well on top of track, but did you have to modify?
Yeah, absolutely. Down there or up there rather, we could have had not that we ever did, but we could have had 10 or 12 All-Americans and been a top 20 team in the nation. And if we would have lost to Navy, it was considered a losing year. Their whole thing is beat Navy, that whole Service Academy rivalry. And that's actually a great story because, the kids, in addition to their track training, if you're not an athlete, you're doing intramurals. They have a saying that every cadet an athlete, every athlete challenged to their ability. And so if you're a Division I athlete, you're locked into your sport. If you're not a Division I athlete, then you're doing either intramurals or you're doing military drill, which is where they're out on the parade grounds and lots of military PT. Well, that didn't stop. The track kids were not exempted from some of that. So they had to twice a semester take and pass what was called the APFT, the Army Physical Fitness Test. And that's a test that consists of 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run test. And the test has to be completed. You get a 5-minute break between those. You do push-ups for 2 minutes and see how many you can do. And then you get 5 minutes rest and you got to do the sit-ups and then you got to do the 2-mile run test. So, think about that for a second, a 2-mile run for a 250-pound thrower, probably not the easiest thing to do. Everybody's
this is all the athletes. All the students,
the entire Corps of Cadets, all 4,000 cadets had to take this test twice a semester, and which means they had to pass it twice a semester. And of course, you have to train for that. You can't just all of a sudden, if you're a 280-pound thrower or offensive lineman, whatever the case may be, you can't just go out and run 2 miles. So, I was up at West Point for 8 years, and my first 3 years I was served as an instructor as well as a coach. And in my last couple of years, the athletic department bought me out, and I became a full-time coach. But when you're under that environment, as a coach, you have to understand that, okay, again, this takes precedence. It's not just about, vaulting higher or jumping farther or running faster. They've got to be able to do this in the field when they leave this place. And the academy at the time didn't really care that you might have the track meet against Navy on that Saturday. If Thursday was the 2-mile run test and the APFT that we had the whole test, you might have to do that on Thursday, and you're smoked and you travel Friday and you get there and you got to compete on dead legs. And sometimes that happened, and it was the same way at Annapolis. They had to do that thing and come our place. It just kind of depends. They've, I think, started to make some concessions for that now. They've also sort of revamped their physical fitness testing at the academies, and not just the academies, but the whole Army. They have probably a more universal. That test is pretty antiquated. You think push-ups, sit-ups, and running. That's been around forever. They actually do things that are a lot more applicable to what the soldiers are going to see on the battlefield nowadays. I think there's like a 7-8 person test.
And
I was there for almost 8 years, and I loved every minute of it.
So, did you do the Army versus Navy meet 2 times a year, indoor and outdoor?
We did cross country as well too. So really 6, counting both genders. You have Army, Navy, cross, men and women, indoor and outdoor, and the sites rotated, and it was just a great meet.
So, over your 8 years, how did Army
we won
do
more? We won about 75%, which is pretty good. So we had Coach Q, Jerry Quiller was an Olympic distance coach, and he really had that thing rolling pretty good. But it was tooth and nail. I think twice we only won both meets on the same day. Usually you end up splitting. You might win the men and lose the women, or vice versa. But I want to say I don't have those numbers in front of me, Mike, but I think it was close to 70-75%. We won more than we lost. And as an interesting little side note, my first Army Navy experience was down at Annapolis. I went down with Q for the cross country meet and go to pick up the packet. And there's a coach at Navy. Her name is Carmen Mann. She was a pretty high level track athlete at Penn State. It was a 5-time All-American there. And I don't think she ever made the Olympic team, but she ended up making several national teams and getting to see the world through track and field. And so I go there and I get the packet from her and meet her and whatnot. And anyway, I think it was probably 8 years after that, she and I started dating, and she's now my wife for the last 14 years. So
I was going to say, you glassed over that real quick. So what did you think?
Well, I knew she was, because I was a wannabe superstar track athlete. And I remember actually she I'm sure doesn't remember me, but I remember being down at LSU for a level 2 school way back in the day, and she was down there training with a good friend of ours, Boo Schexnader. After she left Penn State, she moved down to LSU to train with Boo, and we were coming off the track for a session at a level 2 school back then. And I see her, she just happened to walk past me, and I turned around to kind of watch her walk past me and ended up walking right into a parked car. So she was a head turner immediately for me.
Oh man, boy, there's a lot of jokes right there, Scott. We'll just keep moving forward. So, but you mentioned, so you were at Army for 8 years.
Yeah.
You met her fairly early. But
Yeah, it was about
you said 8 years later.
We were friends for the first 5 or 6 years I was there. I guess it was probably 6 years, and then. The cool thing about Army Navy is when those two teams, again, they're not, say, SEC or Power 5 caliber teams with consistency. I'm not saying they never get those athletes there, but you understand what I'm talking about. It's different there. But what's great about it is the camaraderie and the esprit de corps on both sides, whether you're at Annapolis or West Point or even out in Colorado Springs. When we have Army Navy track meet, man, there was 1,000 West Point cadets and midshipmen down there cheering you on, and all the generals come down, all the admirals come down. It's a big deal, and it means something, just very much like the Army Navy football game every year. It means something to those men and women in uniform. Right. And so kind of how we got paired up was, again, I knew who she was, and we were just kind of friendly for the first 5 or 6 years I was there. But, we were just by default the only two single people on our respective staffs. And also the only two people under age 50, I think, at 28 and 30, I think we were. So anyway, we were friends for 5 or 6 years. And I remember one year after IC4A's up in Boston, I think we were walking out together, and I got the nerve and asked her out, and went down to see her in Annapolis. And, for whatever reason, she said yes. And we started dating a little bit there. And then I left the Army to take the job down here at Auburn. And we ironically got to our respective academies just about a month apart. So it was all pretty new to her, same time it was new to me. So a lot to learn on both sides. But anyway, I came down to Army and I came down to Auburn rather from Army. And I got down here in August of 2005. And that November, I went up to see her. I think she thought I was coming up for my birthday, and came up and gave her a ring, and she said yes. And I don't think we were engaged 10 months, and we got married. So, but we, at that point in time, we'd been dating for a couple of years. And so, we kind of knew.
What, you mentioned several time All-American and trained with Bush Nader. What events was she, and what kind of
pretty much a long and triple jumper. She was a 21-foot long jumper, 44-foot triple jumper, and almost a 6,000 point heptathlete. Wow. She was a pretty good athlete. Yeah, she she could go out and run 212 on the half and high jump 510, and she was a pretty good athlete.
Holy cow!
And I think post collegiately she just kind of locked in on the triple jump, but yeah, she was a 5-time All-American at Penn State, and then actually coached at her alma mater when her athletic career was up. She coached at Penn State for about 10 years, and then her mom took ill with cancer, and she moved back to Northern Virginia to care for her mom in the last year of her life. And then after her mom passed is when she got hired at the Naval Academy. So I didn't really know her. Again, I knew who she was, but I didn't really know her until I got to West Point. She got to Annapolis. Right. And now I still maintain, by the way, I'm working for West Point because I stole away Navy's best coach and made her my wife. And yeah, so
it's a covert mission, I think, or something like that. So when you came down to Auburn to coach, obviously she had coaching credentials as well. Did she coach at all?
No, we were apart again. I moved down here in 2005. We didn't get married till 2006, that summer of 2006. And she came down right away, and we actually had an opening, and Ralph, Coach Spry, my boss here at Auburn, actually offered her a job, but we kind of thought, you know what, too much of a good thing. Working together all day, coming home together all day. And in truth, she was ready to be done with coaching, I think. She actually got a job and plugged in right away into our athletic administration, and she was working there for 3 years, I guess, until our daughter was born. And then she said, that's it, I'm checking out. I'll be a stay-at-home mama and do this. And so that's right. Yeah, right now our daughter has
good for her.
She turned 12 back in January, and our son is 10. And so we actually adopted our son through foster care. He was Olivia's ours by birth, but 2 years later we picked up Tristan. We got him when he was about 2 years of age, and had him living with us for 2 years before the adoption finally went through. So we're a household of 4.
Yeah, And talk to us about the adoption. I've met both, all three, Carmen, Olivia, and Tristan.
Yeah,
Tristan
yeah,
is
that's
just a handful, which every 10-year-old is. I mean that in all I have a 9-year-old, so all the positive ways there. But you actually, there's kind of this community down there of adoptive parents. Talk to us
so
about that. That's something real special.
Our old AD, Jay Jacobs, who's now down at the University of Florida, but Jay was a career Auburn guy, and he and his wife, Angie, sort of championed the whole foster parenting cause in Lee County, Alabama. And Carmen and I married late in life, so we probably missed our childbearing window. I think I was 35 and she was 37 when we got married. I think she turned 40 a month after our daughter was born. And so, we endured a couple hardships there, but in trying to have some more children, it just wasn't happening. But she had already sort of a little bit of a bond with Tristan. He came to live with the Jacobs. Jay and Angie have had probably 50 or 60 kids in their house. They have 3 daughters of their own.
Wow.
But over, I don't know, however long they were doing that, they probably had 50 kids in their house. Some would stay for as short as a week or two, and some would stay for upwards of a year. And the whole goal of the fostering program, Mike, is to try and get kids back with blood relatives if you can. Nobody was stepping up to the plate. So, but Carmen had already had a little bond with Tristan in that anytime the Jacobs would go out of town for, whatever, the bowl game or a vacation, she would babysit. She was home with Olivia then, so she'd have Tristan over here. And we started talking about it a little bit. And anyway, we became certified foster parents here and slowly transitioned him out of their house into our house. And then, after 2 years of him living with us, he went into care very early on. He was put into foster care about 6 months of age. And he was with the Jacobs up until he turned 2. And then he came to live with us. And finally, about 4.5, I think, is when we were able to formally adopt him. So it was a long, arduous process. And again, you never know the outcome. You're trying to get him back with blood relatives if you can. But, all things for a reason. It worked out the way it was supposed to. So, yeah, but he is a handful. You're right about that. This kid, the reason he was kind of put into care is he had to have a heart surgery when he was early on. And the way the doctor described it, so I could understand it, was his aorta was kind of kinked like a hose, and they had to go in and fix that and repair a valve. And I think they did too good a job because he got a heart like secretariat now. The kid never stops running. Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
I mean, he's the moment he wakes up, man, he's just full speed ahead until he crashes at night. So,
my favorite moment is them jumping into the steeplechase water barrier.
That's the post-meet
into the pit water pit.
To do that. So,
yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you the softball of all softball questions here regarding Tristan. Knowing what you know, and you guys had some your own difficulties going through the adoption and things like that. Just when I should say you with Tristan as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you do it all over?
But I would tell you this: I would try to be more informed. And what I mean by that is, initially it's not just like, okay, he lives with you for 2 years and then you adopt. There's a lot of back and forth between biological relatives and Tristan. And so, whatever care he was getting from us, 10 days later, he'd go see a family relative, and whatever parenting or teaching my wife's trying to do was quickly undone. And it was really hard to see that and to witness that. And it was hard for me to comprehend at 40. I can only imagine been trying to figure it out at Tristan's age, where you're, 2 years of age or less, and you just don't know. There's not that bond like you and I have with our mothers, or most people have with their immediate family members. So yeah, it was certainly challenging, but things that, I think with the benefit of hindsight and hopefully a little more years of maturity, I probably should have done this instead of that. But no, it's all worked out. He's been a real blessing to us. And my wife is, she's found her calling. She, for however good she was as an athlete or a coach or a naval officer, which, unlike me, she was actually in the Navy and a naval officer. I was just a civilian. So, but she could have been an early childhood educator. She's outstanding as a mother.
Well, I've seen her as a mom, and you're right. She, as good as an athlete she was, coach, etc. Boy, she was definitely put on this earth to be a mom. She does a fantastic job. And maybe, Scott, there's a coach listening right now that they and their spouse maybe have kicked around the idea of adopting, or maybe they think, well, I'm a college track coach, I just can't do this. What words of
I
advice
would
or
encourage
encouragement
them to
might you
call
give them?
me. But I will tell you that I'm not alone in this venture. Travis Gepford at Tennessee, he and his wife, Nicole, have adopted several kids. And even more
That's
recently than
right.
that, Francesca Green out of Arizona. Francesca's a single woman taking care of her mom, and she just adopted 2 or 3 little kids that have been living with her for quite a while. So it can be done. And I would argue that Francesca's probably, I don't think Travis's, those were planned adoptions. They were not via foster care, like either ours and or Francesca's. But, I got the easy end of this whole deal. I get to believe and go play track coach for 3 or 4 days a week while my wife is saddled with the kids at home and making sure that they're really, learning and thriving and developing. And, I look at somebody like Francesca and I hold her in awe. She's, I wouldn't even say that she and I are great friends. We're just friendly. And we were out there a couple of years ago and I had a chance to meet her and her situation, and we got to talking about family dynamics and all this. And I hold her in extremely high regard as a human being, for her being able to do this as a single parent, and also caring for her mother, so we can all find excuses as to why we can't do things, but Francesca seems to make it all figure out how can I do this? And yeah,
that's a really good point. I remember that about Francesca. She always is posting milestone pictures on Facebook of the process, and boy, I tell you what, that kid can't look any happier than
she's
with his
top
mom
shelf
now.
human
so
being.
awesome.
I mean, she is, I think she's a fine coach,
Yes.
but as good a coach as she may be, she's a much better person. And like I say, she has a very high regard and from my viewpoint.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. You always can want to give kudos for someone who is so selfless, you and your wife Carmen there, to adopt little Tristan. And like I said, I've seen him so many times. It's obviously a positive because that kid is happier than all get out. So talk to us about, it's hard to transition from something like that. That's so important to where it makes track look so not important, but let's talk about Auburn.
16. Yeah. 16. Yeah. This,
15,
I'll be going into year
years.
17 whenever we get back to work. I was at West Point and I've known Ralph for probably 20, 25 years. He actually called me once before, but I had just gotten to West Point. And I wasn't quite ready to make that move. Excuse me. And when he called me the second time around and said, "Hey, I got a job for you," I was like, "Well, hold on a second now." I said, "I don't know much about Alabama, but I watch the History Channel." And, and here I am with a black girlfriend who eventually became my wife. And we weren't even engaged yet, but I could kind of see it heading that direction. And Ralph said, "No, come on down, man. You're going to love it." I'm picturing History Channel, Alabama, 1960s and civil rights and fire hoses and all that stuff. Anyway, and I got down here and it's been absolutely great. Ralph actually did me one better, and Carmen's a chameleon. She'd have fit in anywhere. But, Ralph said, "Hey, bring her down too. She can come down." And she actually couldn't get away from work again. She was in the Navy. But Ralph said, "Hey, man, if you want to stroll hand in hand, you can stroll hand in hand with my wife down Main Street and see what kind of looks and stares you get." And he says, but they're all trying to figure out who's Ann stepping on Ralph with, because they all know Ann. So, but no, man, it's been great. And, I had probably the same misconception when I moved to New York. I was expecting, the Yankees and Times Square and street crime. And, West Point's 50 miles north of that, right in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains. It's just beautiful up there. So it was my own ignorance.
Hey, when I coached at Mississippi State, we had to, every parent of a recruit, they always asked me, they said, "Hey, we saw the movie Deliverance." I'm like, "Oh man, hey, I'm not saying we're perfect now, because we certainly aren't, but that definitely is not in Starkville on Mississippi State's campus, so that same kind of misconception of the overall, although, however, unfortunately, we still have our issues in
hopefully
society,
we're
that's for sure.
Progressing every day, but it's been absolutely great. We love living down here. This is home now. I've been down here 16 years, and I hope I'm able to, I'll stay as long as they'll have me, I guess. But it's been I have the vertical
And what are
jumps
you
and the
coaching there
multis
at
is sort
Auburn?
of my little piece of the pie. I've kind of spearheaded recruiting for coach. I've been with Ralph for, like I say, 16, 17 years now, and helped him out with the sprints a little bit, although he's really the mastermind there, and I'm just kind of helping him out with recruiting or whatnot. But yeah, I coach the verticals and the multis, and kind of run the home meets and that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, it's been a great experience down here.
And what are some highlights you've had over the
I
past
probably
16
have to
seasons
steer to
there?
the high jump more than anything else. We've had a fair amount of success there. We've had 9 SEC champs and 14 All-Americans. One of my guys made the Olympic team. We've had a couple Olympic high jumpers, though. I didn't coach Donald Thomas, but he was a world champion, and Jerry Clayton had him before I got down here, and then Jerry moved on to Michigan. But really, what I know about the high jump, I would tell you that I learned 90% of it from Jerry Clayton. He's an excellent field coach, and he really, just by watching and observing how he did things, I think I learned a lot from him in with regard to that event. But we've had a fair amount of success there. I don't know, probably the best kid I had was a gal named Raven Harris, who we stole right out of the Tide's backyard. She's from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and she was a 5-time SEC champ. And I did not know that. How
I
about
recruited
that?
Raven Harris, right? Yes,
Yeah.
I really
she was a great athlete. She jumped at 2 Olympic trials for us, and she's over in Montgomery now. She's still she's doing great things down here. So, so we've had a fair amount of success in that area, and
Scott, you don't know this. I'm going to stay on Raven here for 1 second. I got in trouble for not signing her at Mississippi. Al Schmidt was extremely displeased with me not getting Raven Harris at Mississippi State. I did not know that.
Ironically, Al called me just the other day. We were catching up. He's got a former athlete whose son is coming to Auburn for aerospace engineering, and he wanted to know if we could help him out with a managerial spot. So it was fun catching up with him. We talked for about 20 minutes, and
cool.
I hadn't heard from him in a while, so it was good to hear his voice. Yeah,
Big Daddy Al, man, I love him.
Great guy.
Always indebted to that man. That's for sure. Great guy. Well, let's talk about this project you worked on. So there was a big change in the equipment that you used at Auburn. In a global scope. So we're talking about all the pole vault pits, high jump pits, hurdles, etc. You guys made a decision, I think around maybe 2017 or so, that maybe the equipment you had at that time just wasn't meeting the level of importance that Auburn has for track and field and the SEC. Talk us through that project, the beginning of, when did you notice maybe you needed to make a change?
We had,
maybe what were some of the signs?
When I got to Auburn, our Hutzel Rosen track had just been built, and it was a really fine venue. The track is great, and we had all new equipment at that point in time, and from a few different manufacturers. But as time went on, and it wasn't that much time, things started to sort of fall apart a little bit. And we'd call and get a replacement piece, and next thing you know, we're another one, and that stuff adds up over time. And I think I want to say it started with something as simple as a high jump weather cover, where the things were splitting at the seams and buckles tearing, all that stuff. Anyway, and it was, I think, 1 month out of warranty, like a year-long warranty, and they wanted to charge us sticker price for a replacement. And Coach Spry got a little fed up, and he said, "That's it. We're going to start shopping around." And just so happened, I believe SECs were that year at Mississippi State. So whatever that was, 2015 or thereabouts. And they had all new gill equipment out there. And I think that's, I remember talking to you there and hey, what's the story on this? And, I think I asked you the question, how long do you guarantee your weather covers for? And you said 12 years. I said, 12 years. And I said, other people are 12 months. And he's like, yeah, I know. It was our 12 year. Okay. So I go back and tell Ralph, and he's like, well, let's start exploring a little bit. And I think, as we got to working through that, I think it was initially just a couple of piecemeal orders from, high jump standards. We had some problems with several pieces of our equipment, pole vault standard malfunctioning and high jump standards and whatnot. Just the litany of things. And I think kind of what really impressed me initially was, okay, these guys are standing by their warranty for 12 years as opposed to 12 months. And I think he even told me, say, yeah, it used to be 10 years. We didn't have to replace them. So we decided we'll make our warranty 12 years. So that's pretty good business. So, we got a couple of things from Gil early on. I think high jump standards was maybe the first thing, a couple of blocks, and started kind of testing them out and really started to like this sort of stuff. And our equipment had kind of become into a state of disrepair. Certainly not something you would expect from an SEC caliber program. And we won a national title down here. We've got a slew of top 10 finishes, and it just was subpar. The equipment, quite honestly, was subpar. So, we ended up deciding to overhaul the whole shebang here with hurdles and pits and blocks and weather covers and standards, and it's been actually, I think, about a $300,000 venture, I believe, from top to bottom when we decided to renovate with Gil.
Yeah, the way I describe it is, you guys, I always have this picture of the windshield wiper, and you can think about the windshield wiper pushes all the water off to the side, and it's a clean slate. It was kind of like you did that, like you just kind of windshield wiped all the equipment off, all the equipment that just wasn't up to par. And then replaced it with all brand new equipment from us. And by the way, I know I've said this to you privately, but I have to make sure I say this publicly. Thank you to you and Ralph and the entire Auburn enterprise there that trusted us with such a big job. This was no small feat. What you guys did
Mike,
there.
I tell you what probably won it for you more than anything was just the follow through and what I will call customer service. It's one thing if you own a high dollar steakhouse and I go to your restaurant and you under or overcook my steak, I'll probably ask you to correct it, and hopefully you'll do that. And if I come back and you do it again and you do it again and again and you keep cooking eventually I'm going to find a different restaurant. So I couldn't be happier with the I'll call it a partnership that we have now with Gil. It's been great. We've been using the new equipment. It's 3 years old, but it still looks new. And we've had it, and we get unbelievable compliments on it. When people come to our places for meets, we their eyes kind of pop. The wow factor's there. We've got the 3 pole vault pit, 4 pole vault pits, and the brand new standards, and the 2 high jump pits on each end, and enough hurdles to do the track twice. We have 180 hurdles we can run on both sides of the track if you want to, and that's probably my favorite piece. I'm not even the sprint coach or the hurdle coach, but and I know it's Coach Fry's too. He really liked the trigger mechanism that you guys have on your hurdles. It's seamless. These 65-year-old officials don't have to go into a full squat to move a hurdle up and down. It's done immediately. They're absolutely beautiful, and they're idiot proof. They're marked each height, so you know exactly where to move them to. It's a better mousetrap. You guys have really come through. But having said that, I remember very clearly when we were sort of negotiating this whole deal. You mentioned to me that, hey, this stuff is made by humans. Our humans make it. Our humans make mistakes. There's no guarantee it's all going to work. What the guarantee was that if it's wrong, we're going to make it right. And that really resonated with me after a few bad experiences. I know Coach Spry felt the same way too. And this is something that we really wanted to make sure we got it right, because you make an order that big, it's got to last. It's not something we're not ordering equipment of that magnitude and that dollar amount every year, every other year. You expect that investment to last. And like I say, 3 years into it, we have yet to have a hurdle malfunction. They are absolutely outstanding. And
I think you brought up a really good point there. And sometimes people think it's a sales technique or it's salesy, but what you're talking about there is not the cost of equipment. You're talking about the cost of ownership. If we use, say, in the track world, and we talk about high jump standards. Well, if you buy a set of high jump standards for $100, and I don't know that there are any out there for $100, but so this is just as an example, versus the $500 high jump standards, but you have to replace those $100 high jump standards every other year, where the $500 standards would last you 12 years. You're actually spending more money over that 12 years than you are if you were just to pay a little bit more up front. It's that cost of ownership. And I think that's what maybe you guys are seeing as you're in year 3 now. And I believe, if I'm right, there's been no replacement. I know we and again, I thank you for bringing it up. My mantra is, hey man, humans make this, humans sell it, humans buy it, humans ship it. We're going to make a mistake, especially for a multitude of this, an order of this magnitude. So I know we messed up the top pad. I think you have like 100 pole vault top pads for getting that thing just right. But,
yeah,
but I think that's the only replacement part.
I wouldn't even call it a replacement part. As I recall, you promised a deadline of whatever the date was. And I'll just say it was September 30th. And I want to say 2 weeks before that, you called me up and said, hey, Scott, our people are backed up. We're not going to have the top pad screened for you that time. So I didn't even have to explain myself. Before I could go any further, you said, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to send you a top pad. It's just not going to be logoed. And in the meantime, we're going to make you that logo top pad. And so what we have at our place now on all of our pole vault pits and all of our high jump pits are 2 top pads. So we have the unlogoed ones underneath, and then a short while later. So we weren't delayed at all from practice standpoint. We got this in the fall, late summer. And so right away, as soon as we got it, we were able to put the pit together and start jumping. And then another month later, we get another top pad. So for each pit. So basically our pits are probably 2 inches taller than all your other gill pits because we have an extra top pad, which the kids love. And so those are the little things. And that's not a little thing. That's actually a big thing, because I'm sure those were not cheap to make twice. But for whatever reason, your screener got backed up and couldn't deliver by the deadline. You guys handled that better than I would have expected. I would have been happy with the 2-week notice saying, hey, Scott, it's going to take just a little bit longer. Okay, cool. You keep me in the loop on the front end. I don't have to hunt you down and saying, hey, Mike, where's this pit? Where's this cover? So you were out in front of the problems, and then you addressed it like I would want somebody to, like I would want to treat somebody else. You take care of it before there's a problem. You make your clientele aware of the situation and how you're going to rectify that, how you're going to remedy that for them. So again, that's a little thing, but I wouldn't say that wasn't like it was a replacement item. It was like a bonus item.
Right. Yeah. Help us visualize, because the thing that gets the most comments that I've seen when I've been at I think I've been to 1 or 2 track meets at Auburn since then, is the pole vault setup that you have there. I call it, what do we call it? The towers of power, the big pole vault centers. Kind of describe what your pole vault setup is there. Make people jealous of what you have for pole vaulting.
Our track runs north-south orientation, and on each end of the pit, just outside the oval, but still part of it's all one-piece track. It's not like it's off in a field somewhere. Down the straightaways, we have 170 feet of runway and a pole vault pit at each end of the track. And in the middle, we have a dual front pit that you can jump from either side. So we can actually do 2 pits going the same direction for a multis, or if we just wanted to run 2 pole vaults at the same time. So both pits go the same direction. And when we were putting in the new standards there, and I apologize, the model name is escaping me right now, but your biggest, best standard that you make, what are they called? Thank you. AGX.
The AGX standards, the ones that if you've seen pictures or video.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the same ones you have in NCAAs. Yeah. And they go up, 21.6 or however tall they are. But the padding is built into it. And when those 8 standards were going up, so each one of our pits has those standards on. They're bolted to the track. It was like you thought we were installing a monorail or something at Auburn with the track. Like, what are those things? And then it's just the column, the custom colors that you have on there. You're limited only by your imagination. We've got all of our stuff is now Auburn logoed and ID'd and done so professionally, not with a decal that peels off or fades. It's digital quality laser etched graphics right onto the standard as well as to the pad on the standard. I'm the vault verticals guy here too, so I'm on the pits probably more than anybody, and they're just outstanding. I mean, they, again, 3 years in, we've yet to have an issue where they have slipped or failed, or it just doesn't happen. So you guys really hit a home run on that one too. It's just been outstanding. I sound like I'm gushing here too much, but every piece of equipment we've got from you, whether it's the starting blocks or the hurdles or the high jump standards or whatever it's been, it's been outstanding. The quality, not just the looks. The looks are incredible, but I would settle for something that's not as attractive if it's going to last. Well, we got both from you guys. We got the durability and the aesthetics that we were hoping for.
Well, I'll tell you what was really fun about putting this together for you, and then to be able to see it, you guys, is if you've not been at Auburn at their track facility, their offices are on the
we're on the track side. So basically, it's a 2-story building. There's a kind of bridge overlooking from the parking lot, and the lower level is the team locker rooms and training. The upper level is the coaches. So we can kind of stand on the balcony and oversee the whole track.
Yeah, when your office is right there, and when you took me out to the balcony, and to see the whole picture put together. So you have the high jump pit that's in the colors with the logo, the high jump standards. The starting blocks are in the blue.
And
pole vaults, orange. That's right. Yeah, the pole vault set up over there. You have the track shelters, even over on the far side with the steeplechase, with the steeplechase barrier, the mesh barrier that we put the Auburn logo on. To have that just complete look to me is what is the most impressive to me, what I like doing the best. Instead of having a piece over here, a piece over here, it looks like one big cohesive
it really does
design.
And again, the high jump standards match the pole vault standards, which match the hurdles, so it really kind of gels together. Now, I'm not a decorator of any sorts, but it's like walking into somebody's home where it's really just put together, and things are you can just tell it just kind of flows from one venue to the next. And while you mentioned those high jump pits, one of the things I like about them is that your biggest pits, the ones that we have, are so stinking big, man. They don't shift at all. A lot of times in a practice or competition, you go and you got smaller pits, whatever, and all of a sudden officials got to stop, and everybody's got to come out of the stands to help these old officials drag the pits and reposition them. Not at our place, man. Those things stay put. They are big.
I'll tell you, as we were creating this line of equipment, which you might have been, if not the very first, you were one of the first. Right out as soon as we created them, we were able to deliver straight to Auburn. But one of the reasons that was important for the graphic capabilities, and even up to the top of the student athlete shelters and that steeplechase barrier that I talked about, the reason that was important for me to have it, that I pushed on our team to have that kind of look, that ability to have that cohesive look, is when you go to the football stadium, or you go to the basketball stadium at Auburn or any school. Actually, I can't even say, it used to be you'd say at a Power 5 school, but now it's trickled down to D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO. It looks like it's serious business. You walk into the basketball and there's posters of former coaches, or the logos, or the logo treatment. It's important because it's basketball. Well, to me, it was important. Like, hey, track and field is important. Yeah. That's my number one, and the customers I'm working on, that's their number one. Let's elevate our track facility to look like it actually matters, and that's what
there's a definite wow factor to what we have out there now. I'll tell you, one of the things that you guys make, it's such a little thing, but it's a big thing. We don't have a whole lot of. We have a nice big indoor storage building, rather, but we don't have enough space to store everything inside. We've got these unbelievable. The C4 hurdles are like I say, the gold standard in the marketplace, and you guys have a hurdle weather cover that we have over each of our racks of 10 hurdles, and those things, that's the only thing that really sort of shows dirt. And you think about, okay, well, the weather cover gets dirty. Well, yeah, it's supposed to, but it's keeping the dirt off the actual hurdle. That is such a well thought out piece, and it fits easily over the cart of 10 hurdles. I never in a million years would have thought of that, but you keep the sun off the hurdles, you keep the bugs off the hurdles, not bees nesting in that kind of stuff. It's just been really it's a little thing, but to me the little things end up making the big things that much better, because if I go to the track today and uncover one of those racks of hurdles, they're going to look like I just pulled them off the truck the day you delivered them.
Yeah, our goal there, it seems kind of ridiculous. It's like, wait a minute, you have a weather cover for your hurdles? the trick with track and field equipment is, if we only had indoor track, life would be easier for a manufacturer.
Sure.
You take out sun and wind and sand and things like that, bugs, vandals. So, the idea for the weather covers was you're investing a lot of money into hurdles, whether you're a high school buying our high school hurdles, or you're able to budget for the top of the line C4 hurdles that we use at NCAA's, you're still investing a lot of money. And again, we really work on the cost of ownership, not necessarily the cost of equipment. And so to help lengthen that lifespan for you on those hurdles, okay, well, here's a relatively inexpensive weather cover to put on your hurdles. It also looks good, by the way. It has your logo on it, so it doesn't look like you're just throwing a tarp over something. There's a misconception that, oh man, we want Auburn to buy new hurdles every 5 years or every 10, whatever our warranty is on that. I think it's 10. That's not the case, actually. I get much more enjoyment when I walk onto a facility and I see hurdles and I ask the coach, hey, how old are those Gill hurdles? And they're like, oh yeah, I think we bought them 15, 16 years ago. That is much more valuable to me, because there's many more facilities out there that don't have Gill hurdles. So those are the ones I want to sell Gill hurdles to. The guys and gals that have chosen Gill hurdles and other equipment, I want you to be done for quite a while. I want you to go do what you do best, and that's coach.
Man, I can't tell you the number of times we'd be running a meet prior to our partnership with Gill, and raising and lowering a steeple barrier, or just, all of a sudden you're moving it and those things are pretty heavy, and all of a sudden the wheel falls off. And now we need a furniture dolly to move this 5 guys to pick up a barrier and put it in the right place. That's funny. And I kind of overlook this one a lot because I don't coach the distances anymore. But when we have to run a home meet and that falls on my lap, the ease with which your steeple barriers and those wheels you guys have on them now and how they go up and down, that's been a seamless transition too. If I had to guess, Mike, I'd say we probably have shaved 30 to 45 minutes off of our home meets scheduling, because we don't spend all day raising and lowering hurdles. Yeah.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
We don't spend, all this extra time trying to get the steeple barriers out, or the pits. Everything is where it's supposed to be. And so we've made, I think, a more, our meets pretty much run on time down here at Auburn. We've got a great officiating crew, and we've got it down after whatever it's been now, so many years of doing this. But it's become easier since our partnership with Gill, because again, we don't have to worry about that little knob on that hurdle broke off, and my thumbs, officials can't move the hurdles up and down because their thumbs are getting blistered, so it's or they wake sore back because they've been moving hurdles all day. It's pretty seamless and pretty user friendly, which to me it saves us time in practice, but especially so in the meets. Just when you're relying on an officials base that's 60 years plus on average, the ease at which they can move those hurdles and raise and lower them has really sped things up when we have our home meets.
Well, the meets are certain track field meets in themselves are certainly not getting shorter. So anything we can do to help the efficiency, still servicing as many athletes through the heats and stuff, but doing it efficiently to where we can shave off 30 minutes or so. That's a big deal when you're talking about just hurdles and such. So that's really good. I do have to make a little fun. You mentioned the steeplechase barriers, and I remember, when we were taking a tour of the facility before this project, your steeplechase barriers were like, I don't know, noodles. Would that be a fair way of saying it? The wood, and I don't know why they would have used wood, but there was wood in there that had rotted, because that's what wood does outside. And you could touch it, and it would just
it really was
like a sponge.
It was borderline unsafe, and that was probably the most immediate thing that we had to replace. We didn't do it right away because we're like, okay, let's make sure we're getting what we're told we're going to get, and the quality service and craftsmanship and all that. So I think we started off with just the high jump standards and kind of ran with it from there. But when you see the design, which I've been fortunate to do and go through this whole process with you guys, you really have. You've made it. When a home meet rolls around, I don't worry about equipment malfunctioning. I can do my job. I can coach my athletes. I can tend to whatever Coach Spry needs me to tend to. But I don't. The last thing I want to be worried about is, do we have another steeple barrier? Is the standard going to work this time? That's been a huge. You talk about the cost of ownership. Well, there's a stress that comes with ownership too, and that has all been eliminated. From my perspective as the home meet director guy. So
Well, I tell you, I do love hearing that because, my passion is with coaches. As a former college coach myself of 10 years, we got into coaching. The majority of us got into coaching because we like to be on that track and we like to help see student athletes perform better on
Sure.
and off the track, be better people in society, but also be better long jumpers and better steeple chasers and et cetera. I don't know that I've met a coach yet that got into coaching because they love to do the paperwork that's involved with coaching, or B, they loved talking to their equipment manufacturer to get replacement X or replacement Y, and they love stopping their practice because they have to go fix their high jump standards. That is a real passion of mine and our team here at Gill is, you know what, you are a coach for a reason. Let us work with you and handle the equipment side. You go coach, because that's what you love to do. So I love hearing that at meets. You get to just focus on not only your athletes, but you're hosting a meet. So you've got some administration things you have to work on.
I was going to say, sorry, we feel like that we really hit the jackpot. Well, not just with you guys, but with I'll give a plug here to Bynum Sports Surfacing. John Bynum's a good friend, and we got a Bynum track. I had nothing to do with the planning of our track. That was done when I got here. I just happened to I showed up on the day the track was finished. But, again, John has kind of said a similar thing that you just said. Hey, look, we don't have to have you bid your track out 5 years from now because we didn't do a good job. Our track you'd have no idea it was 15 years old with the original surface. It still runs fast. We ran sub 10 seconds on it a year ago, the same we did the first year, so it is an unbelievable quality project. And now we have the equipment to go on top of that track that matches that quality and craftsmanship.
You mentioned some of what the officials have said and some fellow coaches and your fellow coaches there at Auburn. One of the other goals I had when we were working with our R&D team for this type of equipment was that it might also help in recruiting. Obviously, if a kid is being recruited by Auburn, they're also those are the top of the top kids there. So they're also being recruited by other, I hate to use the word big schools, but other schools of that caliber. Has that helped at all with recruiting as far as kids coming there and seeing like, oh man, they must take track serious or they must take
hands down.
Serious.
I'll give you an analogy. If you're out car shopping and you go to the local used car dealership and you see so cars in a lot, and all of a sudden you go over to the BMW dealership and there's that wow factor, like, okay, that's what I'm looking for. Well, that's what we got in Gill. Kids are no different. Kids come on campus, and if they see an old dilapidated pit or standards that don't work, it's like, how committed are these guys? So quite honestly, I'd say we took a hit a few years ago before we got our new stuff because it had just become that run down and dilapidated. It was just in a state of disrepair. And now it's like I'm showing them new stuff. For 3 years I've been showing them the same new stuff, and it looks just the same as the day we unpacked it. I saved the weather covers, which are extremely functional, but again, they're the ones that you do fade a little bit. But again, that's the sun. That's living in it's going to be 90 degrees down here tomorrow. So we get that kind of intense sunlight and for 320 days a year down here. So ours see a fair amount of sun and rain, but I tell you, every time we peel that weather cover off, the pit's as dry as a bone, and it's not like they're waterlogged. You guys did a great design on all your pits, and I can't believe nobody's figured this out until you guys did, that we went that long. But I love how your pits, high jump and pole vault pits, the vinyl is encased around the whole pit. You don't have it mesh on top where water can sit it and just sink right into the sponge, to the foam part of it. You guys are vinyl all the way around, and your top pads, of course, are mesh. But again, if it rains, it might sink down an inch or two through the top pad, and then it's on vinyl, and it's just the pits never get waterlogged. Thankfully, because they're so doggone big, I can't imagine trying to move those things if they were waterlogged.
I wish that was a design that I could take credit for. We did that back in 2011, and it literally was one of those when the R&D team showed us sales guys, and we saw it. And it was kind of like, oh my, why haven't we been doing this? Like, this is really smart. And so again, we don't hide behind anything. We know we're not the cheapest track equipment out there, but this is that cost of ownership. When we did that, we went to that all vinyl on the base pads instead of that mesh top. Our warranty claims on foam plummeted. I'm talking about fell off a cliff because the foam killer is getting wet and drying out.
Yeah.
Getting wet, drying out. And when you got rain, you've got Sprinkler systems, that foam gets wet a billion times a season and then dries out, and then your foam, you ever have that where you land and the foam shavings comes up into
it's like
your
somebody
athlete's
throwing
eyes
sawdust
and
in your
things
eyes.
like that? Right, exactly. So to have that vinyl on there, I tell you what, it's more expensive to do that. I'll be real up front and frank with you. But it is more expensive to get a pit that's going to last you 12 to 20 years than it is something in 5 years you're going to have to redo the foam or something
that's
like
exactly
that.
right.
Absolutely.
And again, I'm willing personally, whether it's a bulk order for Auburn University that I might have a say in, like this particular, or something in my own personal life. If I can pay a little bit more on the front end and know I'm going to have a longer lasting product, it's all worth it.
Well, this is what cracks me up when we work on track projects. Sometimes, we get sometimes where they only want the cheapest thing. And I tell them, like, well, we're not cheap. There may be some things that we're less expensive in, but we're not cheap. We don't do that in any other aspects of our lives. When you went to buy your last car, I willing to bet, as a former professional gambler, I'm been known to make a few bets in my life, but I'm willing to bet that you did not buy the cheapest car on the lot. Now, all cars are quote unquote the same. I've heard all pole vault pits are quote unquote the same. All cars get you from A to B, have four wheels. Well, maybe they don't all have four wheels anymore, but they all go, right? Some go faster, some go slower, some have more room, some have less room, etc. But I'm willing to bet when you went to buy your car, you had certain things that you wanted: safety, maybe a specific color, and space, and Bluetooth, and all that kind of stuff. That's what we offer with our pole vault pits, is that longevity. That's our number one thing: safety first and foremost, and then can that thing be safe and last you for a long time?
And that safety element is evident because your pits are so big. I mean, our high jump pits, they're like some small school or high school pole vault pits. They're that big. Like, you can't miss this thing. You might travel way down the bar. You're still, I don't remember how big the pits are. I want to say they're over 24 feet, something like that. They're very, very long, but they extend probably 6 or 7 feet past the standard, and they're deep too. So, and the pole vault pits are, just huge. I mean, it's like I remember one of our first home meets when we uncovered the big pit in the middle. It's got the 4 posts on it, the 4 AJX standards. And I remember one of the coaches like, man, it looks like a sailing ship, like a schooner or something. There's big old beams up there. And again, the safety element, not just the foam, but the way you guys built the standards and put the padding right on the standard. It's not like it's a stapled on piece that covers up the upright. It's top to bottom. It couldn't be. You've minimized the hole where the standard setting goes. I mean, it's you don't have to worry about falling into a crevice there if you're slightly off center. It's just, again, it's a much better, safer design.
I tell you, as I've been at Gill now for almost 14 years, a couple more months here, it'll be 14 years, which seems like an extremely long time, but also seems like I started here yesterday. But I've been so blessed to be involved in projects big and small. I mean, certainly a project like yours at Auburn, Scott, was a large one of the largest there was, because you're just doing everything. We did crossbars up to ball pits, and there definitely were some difficulties and speed bumps and steeple barriers that were in our way and stuff like that. It wasn't the easiest process. It wasn't just calling me up and buying a baton or something like that. Looking back on it now, 3 years, and maybe you've had more time to think about it this year because you don't have practice and meets, unfortunately. But would you do it all over again? And if you would you do anything differently?
I would have done it sooner. But having said that, it's been worth the wait, because when we started to have problems with previous suppliers, you guys had your top of the line equipment. Well, by the time we were ready to make the order 2 years later, you guys had better top of the line equipment, better. So it's like, okay, it all worked out the way it's supposed to. Something as simple, I think even before the pole high jump standards we got from you guys, the AJX crossbars. I remember seeing that at the convention. I thought, man, these guys are really thinking. You've just taken the same crossbar and made it harder to displace and knock off. I can't tell you the number of times I've had a high jumper vaulter just, brush it, and all of a sudden the bar falls. And, it happens a lot less now with your bars. I can tell you that. So,
Yeah, I tell you, when you get, coaches by trade are competitive people, whether they were former athletes and were competitive, or now that, they like to line their kids up and run and see who wins. So at Gill, we're all a bunch of former track athletes and track coaches. So that competitiveness has not left us. We just have channeled it into a different way. So, every day we have conversations of how to make things better, faster, lower cost of ownership. We are always thinking with our coaches hat on, how do we make your life easier with better stuff? So it's just a lot of fun,
Mike,
man.
when we got all this on that September day, when 95% of the order came in, and I'm down there with the GAs and the other coaches, and we're just cutting the stretch film off the hurdles and getting everything set up shop. But after 2 or 3 days of that, we had it all in place. Went and got a couple of the ADs who helped us, secure this order, and brought them down to the track and showed them. And I showed them what we had, because I took some pictures of what we had, and I showed them what we received. And they're like, yeah, I can't believe we let you guys go with that. We for that long. We should have done this sooner. And again, that's the only thing I could say. I wish I'd have done. I wish this relationship would have been in place sooner than it was. But again, as great as the equipment looks, the functionality of it has been really good too. But above all, to me, again, I'll default to customer service, something it is you see less and less of as we get more automated with phones and computers. We're not talking to people, we're Zooming people, we're texting. It's more about what you can do from a technology standpoint. And I don't know, I will continue to default. Maybe I'm just behind the times, but I will continue to default to how someone or a group of people treat me as opposed to what they can show me. So, and from that regard, from, not only yourself, Brian and Fred and all the way up to David, you guys have cracked the code. You got everybody else beat on customer service. And that's why I will continue to look your way.
Well, thank you so much for that. And, honestly, that customer service is through our DNA, through our entire company, from obviously the customer service team. But, I could honestly say I would have no qualms having my CFO, my most analytical of analytics here at Gill, talk to a customer, because it is all about treating the customer right. Doing the right thing is always the right thing. And as we take a long-term approach to things, we've been around for just over 100 years now, and we feel like we're stewards of the brand, that we want it to last 100 years past us. So how do you do that? Well, we got to have customers tomorrow,
sure.
not just today, not just.
Well,
today.
It's funny. I thinking back on it now. One of the most impressive things to me was just how accessible, not just you are. I mean, yeah, you're the point man here. But, Fred Dixon, who I've known for a long time. And then, all of a sudden I'm talking to David Hodge and Brian's been down several times for just routine service inspections and whatnot. And that has permeated, the customer service aspect of that has permeated through your whole operation. At least everybody, from the gal answering phones all the way up to David Hodge. I mean, you guys have got it down pat. So I also kind of find it funny that, I think you shared with me one time, you guys were talking about your sales meeting and like, okay, where are we doing the most business this year? Is it Chicago? Is it LA? And actually, no, it's this tiny town in Alabama,
Auburn, Alabama.
I think because not only between, Auburn University, but also I think Auburn High School got outfitted with your stuff.
That's right.
$500,000 business coming out of this tiny 50,000 population place that most people haven't heard of.
Yeah. It was funny. Within 12 months, we deliver you guys, and then, which was everything. And then Auburn High built a whole new track, and we supplied. That's right. I remember. I was like, if you're not from Alabama, you probably don't know Auburn, Alabama, where it is, and besides, the TV with football and such, and basketball. But yeah, Auburn, Alabama.
And hey, I understand amazing. Now too. You guys have, up to. I don't think we're your biggest purchaser anymore. I think University of Oregon may have trumped us now. I understand you guys are doing all the renovations on Hayward.
That is a daily conversation. They are building something that has never been built before, specifically here in USA. And it's it's unbelievable, Scott. It really is. And, we're so thankful and so blessed. And honestly, having Oregon choose Gill is based on the shoulders of guys like you who took a chance with us. You and Michigan's facility and Mississippi State, and there's so many more. And we've got now with the three newest big projects that are being built right now that have chosen Gill. From the city of Louisville is building a huge indoor and outdoor complex. The Virginia Beach facility, which a lot of people have heard about, because that'll be coming online this fall. And then even the city of Chicago, and every one of those have chosen Gill. And those are all based off of you guys. They look towards who has purchased and who has not purchased before. But this Oregon facility.
How did you get in the door there? Like, tell me walk me through that piece.
That is a good story for another podcast episode one day, because it is not a short story. But let me just tell you, while Oregon and Nike, Phil Knight paid for that entire thing, if I remember correctly, which means they can buy whatever they want to buy.
Sure.
It was not. It was a process. They vetted, they interviewed, they qualified and disqualified people throughout the whole process. And I don't want to speak for them, but I think their top choices were customer service. It was like, hey man, we can buy whatever we want. We could buy all this in gold plated if we wanted to, or maybe it would be Oregon yellow plated. Sure. But we're going to host all these meets and the world champs and what have you, and we got to make sure we don't think about track equipment.
Right. Sure.
We're worried about athletes and such, and so it's really is amazing. I can't wait to unveil it. They're saying now that they may actually have a Diamond League meet there this fall. Wow. So we may be unveiling it quicker than we thought as far as an actual track meet, which is exciting. So
yeah, I've seen the updates that they're putting out there on Hayward Field, and also I saw one the other day on Virginia Beach. That looks really cool too. But the facility in Birmingham, Alabama, has all your stuff too, the Crossplex, and that was really, I was kind of involved with that one before the track was even built as a consultant. I got to go up there a few times, and myself and Dan Waters from Alabama got to go up there and kind of add our 2 cents in on how we think things ought to be laid out. And that's a heck of a venue too, which is hosted to multiple NCAA championships as well too. So
well, and growing up in Alabama, running high school track there, that I consider that my home track. In fact, as we're talking right now on my computer, my lock screen is the Crossplex.
About that?
Yeah, it's just very near and dear to my heart. I hope to have one of the guys or gals from Crossplex on the podcast someday, mainly so I can tell people what we used to do in Alabama for indoor track, and tell everybody about the old
barn. Yeah, the barn.
Yeah. That's its own story. Hey, Scott, as we wrap up here, though, I honestly want to flip this around a little bit here, because obviously, we've been talking a lot about the choices and why you were looking to make a decision to change your equipment provider. And again, so humbled that you would choose Gill, and the customer service aspect and branding and quality and safety of equipment. But honestly, I kind of want to turn this around and give you and the Auburn staff shout out for Ralph Spry there and your administration of really taking a step in making track more important at Auburn. And what I mean by that is, this was not a planned renovation. This was not on year 15, we're going to redo everything. You guys had to really, with your administration, make a decision to find the budget to do this. And we're not talking about finding $10,000. We're talking about finding $300 plus.
Yeah.
And you only do that you only do that in a situation where you want to elevate the importance of track and field. You don't just do that willy-nilly. And unfortunately, most people probably from the outside think, oh, well, you're at Auburn. You're in the SEC. You've got all the money in the world. And let me tell you, as a former coach in the SEC, and Scott, you tell me if I'm right or wrong here, while you certainly have your advantages with revenues and such expenditures, you don't just get to go buy anything at any time. That you want.
It's definitely not a blank checkbook here,
Right.
And as things, play out with this whole pandemic, of course, losing basketball, we all lost a great deal of revenue with that. And I'm confident things are going to get back to normal here relatively soon, but I'm pretty sure we'll be playing football this fall. I have no crystal ball and nobody's told me that, but I kind of think that we're hopefully moving past the peak of this a little bit. But, dollars are important everywhere, whether it's, Nike is, as much as they poured into Hayward Field, they still want to do it, within feasibility.
Yep.
So they're going to have the biggest and the best of everything, but at the end of the day, somebody's still got to write the check for that whole thing. So, so they're going to put it out there and do a first class project, and that's how I view our partnership with Gil.
Well, that's what I just want to give Auburn University, and specifically the athletic department, the kudos of, you saw a track program that needed a boost, and they went out and budgeted the money for it. And you know what? That lifts all of track and field, and that is extremely important, whether you're an equipment manufacturer, a track coach, a track athlete, that we continue to raise the importance and the value that we have in the track and field community as coaches and as programs. That is needed more than ever today because of a lot of those things you just mentioned there with the lack of basketball season, maybe a lack of football season, etc. Sure. So I really just want to give you kudos to you and the program there. Again, and I need to have Ralph on the podcast one day, but Ralph Spry, I love that man to death. I know you do as well. You share similar feelings. But again, to you guys to do this, it's a big feather in your cap that you guys would make track important there at Auburn University.
Well, Ralph's been a great boss, and he was, I guess I was kind of the point man on this project, but it was all, of course, with his approval as a head coach and whatnot. And if you want to have Ralph on the podcast, you better make sure he's got some wind blockers around, because he might be out bass fishing on his boat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's true. That's a good point. Good point. No, I'm sure he's getting his fishing in this season, but I also know he'd rather be on that track. I know Ralph.
Yeah, we all would. Yeah, we all would.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, hey, thank you so much. I'm super humbled that you would take the time with us today. It was great getting to know your coaching career, and again, just the affinity that you guys had there at Army, and this great love affair from Army and Navy with Carmen and your family, man. I love that to death. So, and then obviously doing some big things at Auburn University. And for a guy who grew up an hour from the Auburn campus and grew up an Auburn fan a little bit, have since moved to Troy. I want to make sure I always plug my school, Troy, first and foremost. But it is great to see what you guys are doing there. Love you guys and your staff, and wish you continued success.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Well, guys, that's it for today. Certainly hope you received as much value from this episode as we did making it. If you've made it this far, really appreciate you joining us. Your time and attention are super valuable, and we certainly don't take that lightly. And we also don't take lightly your feedback. Would you consider leaving us a rating or a comment in the app that you are using right now to listen to this episode? That would be really valuable for us. We'd really appreciate that. Want to know when future episodes of the podcast are available? The best way is to subscribe to the podcast in this exact same app. Right now, go hit that subscribe button. In the meantime, if this episode of the Gill Athletics Connections podcast provided you with value, would you consider giving that value to others in your network, sharing this episode and other episodes on your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, smoke signals, whatever way you would like to do it? We'd really appreciate you sharing with your network and spreading the value. That's it. Really appreciate you. Can't wait to join you next time for another episode of the Gill Athletics Connections podcast.